The recorded history of the area now known as Xinjiang dates to the 2nd millennium BC. There have been many empires, primarily Han Chinese, Turkic, and Mongol, that have ruled over the region, including the Yuezhi, Xiongnu, Han Dynasty, Gaochang, Kingdom of Khotan, 16 kingdoms of the Jin Dynasty, Turkic Khaganate, Tang Dynasty, Tibetan Empire, Uyghur Khaganate, Kara-Khanid Khanate, Kingdom of Qocho, Kara Khitai, Mongol Empire, Yuan Dynasty, Chagatai Khanate, Yarkent Khanate, Dzungar Khanate, and Qing Dynasty. Xinjiang was previously known as Xiyu under the Han Dynasty, which drove the Xiongnu Empire out of the region in 60 BCE in an effort to secure the profitable Silk Road, but was renamed Xinjiang when the region was reconquered by the Manchu-led Qing dynasty in 1759. Xinjiang is now a part of the People's Republic of China, having been since its founding year of 1949. Background: Xinjiang consists of two main geographically, historically, and ethnically distinct regions with different historical names: Dzungar north of the Dianshan Mountains and the Tarim Basin south of the Dianshan Mountains, before King China unified them into one political entity called Xinjiang Province in 1884. At the time of the Qing conquest in 1759, Dzungaria was inhabited by steppe-dwelling, nomadic Tibetan Buddhist era Mongol Dzungar people, while the Tarim Basin was inhabited by sedentary, oasis-dwelling, Turkic-speaking Muslim farmers, now known as the Uyghur people. They were governed separately until 1884. The native Uyghur name for the Tarim Basin is Altashar. The Qing dynasty was well aware of the differences between the former Buddhist Mongol area to the north of the Dianshan and Turkic Muslims south of the Tianshan, and ruled them in separate administrative units at first. However, Qing people began to think of both areas as part of one distinct region called Xinjiang. The very concept of Xinjiang as one distinct geographic identity was created by the Qing, and it was originally not the native inhabitants who viewed it that way, but rather it was the Chinese who held that point of view. During the Qing rule, no sense of regional identity was held by ordinary Xinjiang people. Rather, Xinjiang's distinct identity was given to the region by the Qing, since it had distinct geography, history and culture, while at the same time it was created by the Chinese, multicultural, settled by Han and Hui, and separated from Central Asia for over a century and a half. In the late 19th century, it was still being proposed by some people that two separate parts be created out of Xinjiang, the area north of the Dianshan and the area south of the Dianshan, while it was being argued over whether to turn Xinjiang into a province. In ancient China, the area was known as Xiyu, or Western Regions, a name that became prevalent in Chinese records after the Han Dynasty took control of the region. For the Uyghurs, the traditional name of the Tarim Basin in southern Xinjiang was Altashar, which means 6 cities in the Uyghur language. The region of Dzungaria in northern Xinjiang was named after its native inhabitants, the Dzungar Mongols. The name East Turkestan was created by the Russian ethnologist Nikita Bishurin to replace the term Chinese Turkestan in 1829. East Turkestan was used traditionally to only refer to the Tarim Basin, and not Xinjiang as a whole, with Dzungaria being excluded from the area consisting of East Turkestan. After the Qing dynasty reconquered this region in 1884, the area was designated Xinjiang, which was used to refer to any area of former Chinese Empire that had been previously lost but was regained by the Qing, but eventually meant this northwestern Xinjiang alone. In the Uyghur language, Xinjiang is considered more center than northwestern in orientation. Early Caucasian inhabitants According to J.P. Mallory and Victor H. Mayer, the Chinese describe the existence of white people with long hair, or the Bai people in the Shanhai Jing, who lived beyond the northwestern border. The well-preserved Tarim mummies with Caucasoid features, often with reddish or blonde hair, today displayed at the Urumqi Museum and dated to the 2nd millennium BC, have been found in the same area of the Tarim Basin. Various nomadic tribes, such as the Yuezhi, Saka, and Wusun, were probably part of the migration of Indo-European speakers who were settled in eastern Central Asia at the time. The Ordos culture in northern China east of the Yuezhi is another example, yet skeletal remains from the Ordos culture were found to have been predominantly Mongoloid. By the time the Han dynasty under Emperor Wu wrestled the western regions of the Tarim Basin away from its previous overlords, the Xiongnu, it was inhabited by various peoples, including Indo-European Tocharians in Turfan and Qocho and Indo-Iranian Saka peoples centered around Kashgar and Khotan. Chinese accounts. The first reference to the nomadic Yuezhi was in 645 BC by Gaochang in his Guanzi. He described the Yuezhi, or Yuezhi, as a people from the northwest who supplied jade to the Chinese from the nearby mountains of Yuezhi at Gansu. The supply of jade from the Tarim Basin from ancient times is well documented archaeologically. It is well known that ancient Chinese rulers had a strong attachment to jade. All of the jade items excavated from the tomb of Fu Hao of the Shang dynasty, more than 750 pieces, were from Khotan in modern Xinjiang. As early as the mid-1st millennium BC, the Yuezhi engaged in the jade trade, of which the major consumers were the rulers of agricultural China. pp. 267–268. The nomadic tribes of the Yuezhi are documented in Chinese historical accounts, in particular the 2nd Manu 1 stone century BC records of the great historian Shiji by Simo Qian. According to these accounts, the Yuezhi originally lived in the area between the Kiliana Heavenly Mountains and Dunhuang, but after they were defeated by the Xiongnu they moved far away to the west, beyond Dayuan, where they attacked and conquered the people of Daxia and set up the court of the king on the northern bank of the Gui River. A small number of the people who were unable to make the journey west sought refuge among the Qiang barbarians in the southern mountains, where they are known as the Lesser Yuezhi. According to Han accounts, the Yuezhi were flourishing during the time of the first great Chinese Qin emperor, but were regularly in conflict with the neighboring tribe of the Xiongnu to the northeast. Roman accounts. Pliny the Elder reports a curious description of the seers made by an embassy from Taprobane to Emperor Claudius, saying that they exceeded the ordinary human height, had flaxen hair, and blue eyes, and made an uncouth sort of noise by way of talking, suggesting they may be referring to the ancient Caucasian populations of the Tarim Basin. Genetic evidence. Modern genetic analysis suggests that Aboriginal inhabitants had a high proportion of DNA of European origin. At the cemetery in Sample, 14 kilometers from the archaeological site of Khotan in Lop County, Xinjiang, where Hellenistic art such as the Sample tapestry has been found, the local inhabitants buried their dead there from roughly 217 BC to 283 AD. DNA analysis of the human remains has revealed genetic affinities to peoples from the Caucasus, specifically a maternal lineage linked to Ossetians and Iranians, as well as an Eastern Mediterranean paternal lineage, seeming to confirm this link. From historical accounts it is known that Alexander the Great, who married Sogdian woman from Bactria named Roxana, encouraged his soldiers and generals to marry local women. Consequently, the later kings of the Seleucid Empire and Greco-Bactrian Kingdom had a mixed Persian-Greek ethnic background. In 2009, the remains of individuals found at the Xiyu tomb complex were analyzed for Y-DNA and mtDNA markers. The study found that while Y-DNA corresponded to West Eurasian populations, the mtDNA haplotypes were an admixture of East Asian and European origin. The geographic location of where this admixing took place is suggested to be somewhere in southern Siberia before these people moved into the Tarim Basin. Xiyu is the oldest archaeological site yielding human remains discovered in the Tarim Basin to date. Some Uyghur scholars claim modern Uyghurs descent from both the Turkic Uyghurs and the pre-Turkic Tarcharians, and relatively fair hair and eyes, as well as other so-called Caucasoid physical traits, are not uncommon among Uyghurs. Genetic analyses suggest West Eurasian maternal contribution to Uyghurs is 42.6%. The estimation of European component in modern Uyghur population ranged from 30 to 60%. Struggle between Xiongnu and Han Dynasty, traversed by the Northern Silk Road. Western regions is the Chinese name for the Tarim and Dzungar regions of what is now northwest China. At the beginning of the Han Dynasty, the region was subservient to the Xiongnu, a powerful nomadic people based in modern Mongolia. In the 2nd century BC, the Han Dynasty made preparations for war when the Emperor Wu of Han dispatched the explorers Zhang Qian to explore the mysterious kingdoms to the west and to form an alliance with the Yuezhi people in order to combat the Xiongnu. As a result of these battles, the Chinese controlled the strategic region from the Ordos and Gansu corridor till Opnor. They succeeded in separating the Xiongnu from the Qian peoples to the south, and also gained direct access to the western regions. Han China sent Zhang Qian as an envoy to the states in the region, beginning several decades of struggle between the Xiongnu and Han China over dominance of the region, eventually ending in Chinese success. In 60 BC, Han China established the Protectorate of the Western regions at Wulai to oversee the entire region as far west as the Pamir. This became the first sign of Han Chinese rule in Central Asia. The sovereignty of Han Dynasty expanded into Central Asia. Tarim Basin and Indo-European kingdoms was under the control of Han Dynasty and was influenced by Han Chinese emperors. During the usurpation of Wang Mang in China, the dependent states of the Protectorate rebelled and returned to Xiongnu domination in AD 13. Over the next century, Han China conducted several expeditions into the region, re-establishing the Protectorate from 74 to 76, 91 to 107, and from 123 onward. After the fall of the Han Dynasty, the Protectorate continued to be maintained by Kawei and the Western Jin Dynasty. Uyghur nationalist historians such as Turgan Albus claimed that Uyghurs were distinct and independent from Chinese for 6,000 years, and that all non-Uyghur peoples are non-indigenous immigrants to Xinjiang. However, the Han Dynasty established military colonies and commanderies to control Xinjiang from 120 BCE, while the Tang Dynasty also controlled much of Xinjiang until the Inhabitants rebellion. Chinese historians refute Uyghur nationalist claims by pointing out the 2,000-year history of Han settlement in Xinjiang, documenting the history of Mongol, Kazakh, Uzbek, Manchu, Hui, Zibo indigenes in Xinjiang, and by emphasizing the relatively late westward migration of the Uyghur people from Mongolia of the 9th century. The name Uyghur was associated with the Buddhist people in the Tarim Basin in the 9th century, but completely disappeared by the 15th century, until it was revived by the Soviet Union in the 20th century. a succession of peoples. The Western Jin dynasty succumbed to successive waves of invasions by nomads from the north at the beginning of the 4th century. The short-lived non-Han Chinese kingdoms that ruled northwestern China one after the other, including former Liang, former Qin, later Liang, and Western Liang, all attempted to maintain the protectorate, with varying extents and degrees of success. After the final reunification of northern China under the Northern Wei Empire, its protectorate controlled what is now the southeastern third of Xinjiang. Local states such as Kashgar, Khotan, Qocho, and Sheshan controlled the western half, while the central region around Turpan was controlled by Gaochang, remnants of a Xiongnu state northern Liang that once ruled part of what is now Gansu province in northwestern China. Turkic Empire. In the late 5th century, the Tuyuhun and the Rouran asserted power in southern and northern Xinjiang, respectively, and the Chinese protectorate was lost again. In the 6th century, the Turks began to emerge in the Altai region, subservient to the Rouran. Within a century, they had defeated the Rouran and established a vast Turkic Khaganate, stretching over most of Central Asia past both the Aral Sea in the west and Lake Baikal in the east. In 583, the Gokturks split into western and eastern halves, with Xinjiang coming under the western half. In 609, China under the Sui dynasty defeated the Tuyuhun, forced them to take refuge in Kilian Mountains. Tang dynasty and struggle with Tibetan Empire. Starting from the 620s and 630s, Chinese Tang dynasty conducted a series of expeditions against the Eastern Turks. By 640, military campaigns were dispatched against the Western Turkic Khaganate and the vassals, the oasis states of southern Xinjiang. The campaigns against the oasis states began under Emperor Taizong with the annexation of Gaochang in 640. The nearby kingdom of Kara was captured by the Tang in 644 and the kingdom of Qocho was conquered in 649. The expansion into Central Asia continued under Taizong's successor, Emperor Gaozong, who dispatched an army in 657 led by Su Dingfang against the Western Turk Khagan Ashina Helu. Ashina's defeat strengthened Tang rule in southern Xinjiang and brought the regions formerly controlled by the Khaganate into the Tang Empire. The military expedition included 10,000 horsemen supplied by the Uyghurs, who were close allies of the Tang. The Uyghurs had allied with the Tang ever since the dynasty supported the revolt against the reign of the Zhui and Chuo, a tribe of TL people. Xinjiang was administered through the Angxi Protectorate and the 4 garrisons of Angxi. Tang hegemony beyond the Pamir Mountains in modern Tajikistan and Afghanistan ended with revolts by the Turks, but the Tang retained a military presence in Xinjiang. These holdings were later invaded by the Tibetan Empire to the south, and Xinjiang alternated between Tang and Tibetan rule as they competed for control of Central Asia. In 662, a rebellion broke out and Tang army was sent to control the situation, but was badly defeated by the Tibetans in the south of Kashgar. After defeating Tang in 670, the Tibetans gained control of the whole region and completely subjugated Kashgar in 676–8 and retained possession until 692. Then China regained control of all southern Xinjiang and retained it for the next 50 years. 728, the local king of Kashgar was awarded a brevet by the Tang emperor. During the devastating Anshi rebellion, Tibetans invaded Tang China on a wide front from Xinjiang to Yunnan, sacking the Tang capital in 763, and taking control of southern Xinjiang. A significant milestone of the Tang period of Xinjiang was that it marked the end of Indo-European influence in Xinjiang. This was partially spurred by Chinese policies, which unintentionally sped the Turkification of Xinjiang, rather than the Sinification that had occurred in other territories conquered by the Tang. The Tang dynasty recruited a large number of Turkic soldiers and generals, and the Chinese garrisons of Xinjiang were for the most part staffed by Turks rather than those of the Han ethnicity. Xinjiang was beginning its transition into a region that is linguistically and culturally Turco-Mongolic, which it still is to this day. Uyghur Empire and Tang dynasty. By 745 the Uyghur Empire stretched from the Caspian Sea to present-day Mongolia and lasted from 745 to 840. After the Battle of Talis in 751, Uyghur Khaganate took control of northern Xinjiang, as well as much of Central Asia, including Outer Mongolia, where their empire originated. It was also during this time that Tang China started a process of withdrawal from Central Asia. Yuan Khan acted quickly and took over the fertile Tarim Basin as well at about the same time that the Tibetan Empire extended to Xinjiang. The Chinese defeat at the Battle of Talis, combined with a series of rebellions, the largest being Yuan Lushan, forced the Chinese emperor to turn to Yuan Khan for assistance. Seeing this as an ideal opportunity to meddle in Chinese affairs, the Khagan agreed, quelling several rebellions and defeating an invading Tibetan army from the south. As a result, the Uyghurs received tribute from the Chinese, and Yuan Khan was given the daughter of the Chinese emperor to marry. In 762, in alliance with the Tang, Tengri Bogu launched a campaign against the Tibetans. He recaptured for the Tang emperor the western capital Luoyang. Khagan Tengri Bogu met with Manichaean priests from Iran while on campaign, and was converted to Manichaeism, adopting it as the official religion of the Uyghur Empire. In 779 Tengri Bogu, incited by Sogdian traders living in Urdu-Bali, planned an invasion of China to take advantage of the accession of a new emperor. Tengri Bogu's uncle, Tumbagatarkhan, opposed this plan, fearing it would result in Uyghur assimilation into Chinese culture. In 840, the Kyrgyz tribe invaded from the north with a force of around 80,000 horsemen. They sacked the Uyghur capital at Urdu-Balik, razing it to the ground. The Kyrgyz captured the Uyghur Khagan, Kuribir, and promptly beheaded him. The Kyrgyz went on to destroy other Uyghur cities throughout their empire, burning them to the ground. The last legitimate Khagan, Oge, was assassinated in 847, having spent his six-year reign in fighting the Kyrgyz and the supporters of his rival Ormis, a brother of Kuribir. The Kyrgyz invasion destroyed the Uyghur Empire, causing a diaspora of Uyghur people across Central Asia.